Hi, my name is Christine. Welcome to the very last episode of Unmuzzled at 67. This is episode 9 and it's called, rightly so, In Conclusion. So this episode is dedicated to Cam, the young man who has produced my podcast, who has become a friend, a mentor, and he is the person who took a chance on a pensioner who had a story to tell and made my dream a reality. So Cam, from my soul, I want to thank you for your skills, your expertise, your sheer genius, and recently I found out you were an oracle as well, and of course your patience and guidance. I remember Cam's first question to me when we sat down to film the first episode, and he said to me, "What kind of lighting do you want, Christine?" And I said, kind lighting, please, Cam. And so it began. So if you're sitting comfortably, I'll begin the last episode. I felt the need to share the practical benefits for me from doing my life story on a podcast. Telling my story has been truly like therapy for me. I've learned so much that has made an impact on my recovery and moved it up a level. So now I'm kind of out the other side of my life story podcast. Sharing my story with you has been the best thing I've ever done. It's allowed me to face up to what happened to me and deal with it. When I look back, I still don't really know how I got here. For years and years, I always said that I would never tell anyone about my story. I was too embarrassed. I didn't want people to feel sorry for me. And importantly, I just wasn't ready to face myself and take responsibilities for all the wrong decisions I'd made and the cruel, heartless person I became for a lot of my life, with no emotional attachment or empathy for anyone. I'm glad to say that today is very different. The research I did for some of the episodes opened new avenues of wellness, gave me information about my old behaviours that I genuinely didn't know about. So although by the time I got here, I considered myself to be on the path to wellness, doing the podcast, as I say, brought a whole new dimension and a new readiness to explore further. I see now that I will continue to research and investigate, probably forever, one day at a time, in my ongoing quest to find me and be the best version that I can be. So although the podcast has come to an end, the getting better continues. In fact, it feels like it's just beginning a new chapter that lies ahead for me. Doing the podcast gave me a sense of objectivity. I think unless you do something like that, it's I would say almost impossible to be objective about your own life. That let me see my story differently. Being able to do that for the very first time allowed me to kind of stand outside myself, to see and hear the weekly episodes the way you did, as a person's life story, albeit mine. That changed my concept, as now I have very little emotional attachment to my story and see it now for what it is. And if you are trying to get better, that is probably one of the best things that can ever happen. And it shows you that what happened to you is firmly in the past, now that I have faced up to it and I have dealt with it. But I will keep researching, I will keep looking to see if I can do any more. What I've also come to realise is how almost all of my life I was always looking for answers. My adult life was spent reading self-help books I personally have never read a fictional book in my life. I watched YouTube videos, self-help books, a lot of Tony Robbins, because back in the day, he was really the man. There's so many people that can help you now, but back in the day, he really was the man that stood out amongst the rest. I was always looking for direction. I was looking for a better way of living. I was looking for practical help from others who had turned their life around. But my brain was going at 100 miles an hour. No wonder I couldn't take anything in. I was incapable of making a plan to action anything. I never had any follow through. But still, I continued in vain, searching for something that could help me all of my adult life. At times I would be so inspired by what I had read or what I had watched, but it never stayed in my head long enough to make any difference. Even although in my later years I knew, for example, that I needed therapy and initially could not afford it, all I could do was to help myself, take things into my own hands. So once I'd been practicing meditation for a while, I was able to do search in a different way now because my brain was more calm and I could search with rigour. I was determined to find out what the fuck was wrong with me. I was mentally out of step with the rest of the human race, and I never gave up trying. And I'm so glad that I did. I never gave up on myself and resigned myself to being a BAM for the rest of my life. I suppose that would have been the easy way out. My thinking for most of my life was one-dimensional. I was never able to see the other side of the story, the other point of view. I was never able to see there was actually two sides to every story. My thinking was rigid. It was black and white and right and wrong. And my habits were rigid too. Even my eating habits were regimented. I ate the same food every day, all the time. Super healthy foods only. I hadn't had a packet of crisps for about 50 years. Occasionally, I would go out for a meal and have a high-calorie dessert because I have a sweet tooth or an afternoon tea. But the next day, I was back on this eating pattern that never varied. Recently, I'm glad to say that my thinking has completely changed, and what I used to eat now has no appeal for me at all. And that seems to have happened organically because I'm not aware of gradual change. I'm just thinking, I don't want that food anymore. And even where friends are concerned, I find myself spending more time with friends now that, yeah, they were in my life, I knew them, but I never really had taken time in the past to really get to know them. And now that I have got time, because I think differently and my brain is more calm, I now find great qualities in them that I never saw before. And equally, people that I used to admire and really, really want to spend time with them, now that I have been able to spend time with them, I think, what was that all about? I just couldn't see what I had seen in the past. Why? Because I've changed. I'm a different person now. So I see life very clearly now. I'm able to trust myself. That's a big one for a BAM, you know. That's a big one. I can now prioritise what I need and who I need around me. And I like these changes in me, and I'm looking forward to more. Now I'm going to ask you to please bear with me, because I'm going to step back and look and talk again about a subject that has come up quite a lot during the Life Story podcasts, because I really want to make a specific point to you. Trauma. Now, please don't switch off, please. Bear with me. I just want to tell you about my recent research and how my story fits into it. So research tells me things that happened to us when we were children tend to have a bigger impact on us than events that happen to us as adults. When we were children, our worlds were smaller and we didn't have much power or control. And our brains weren't fully developed. So we perceived many experiences as highly important. We don't want to remember the bad things that happened, but they're there, waiting to be explored. The lost inner child has recorded all of these events, and they are as emotionally real today as they were then. So I say, good luck to those who say, I don't want to talk about these times. Why would I want to talk about all that? I'm fine now. Or people that say, I don't want to talk about it. These parts of your life are dormant. They're not dead. And if they're not faced up to and resolved, they will show up in your life for the rest of your life. So, this is the point I want to make. How does unresolved trauma in childhood manifest itself in adults? What does it look like? If you're an adult that's had something traumatic happen to you, how does it affect the rest of your life? What does that look like? Let me read to you what research has told me. What will show up in your life? Depression, self-destructive and risky behaviours, suicidal thoughts, detachment, avoidance of emotions, addiction, eating disorders, problems with trust, relationship problems. This one is really key, an inability to cope with routine, stressful life events. Low self-esteem, anxiety, unexplainable anger, and a struggle with setting boundaries. So, ladies and gentlemen, I ticked every box. So I turned out as exactly as I should have turned out as a typical person who has had a trauma as a child. Here's something to remember, and I'm going to have to remember it too. A throwaway comment from an adult can become a defining moment for a child's sense of self. From birth to age 20, trauma occurring in these formative years creates lifelong dysfunctional patterns in how we look at and interact with ourselves and others. So that's just something for you to think about. I mean, that's just something I found out recently. And that's why I'm bringing it up today on the very last episode, because I guess that confirms to me, no, I wasn't a BAM. Something happened and I was the type of person who was a typical textbook person to come out of a trauma to tick every single box. So let's leave that there. That's for you to think about if you want to. So when I look back, I lived my life in a state of anxiety and stress. I was in the flight or fight mode. I saw stress and disaster in every situation where often there was none. This was the way I had become hardwired to see and to be in the world. Now in my late 60s, I kind of almost see the ridiculousness of how I saw the world, and how that, in many ways, that never needed to happen. It never needed to be like that. But that is who I was then, and for most of my life. But with perseverance and determination, I've actually managed to rewire my brain. And that's a pretty big thing to say. You're probably thinking, she's a fucking liar. No, I'm not actually. And I'm going to tell you how I did it. And Google it, please have a look. It's such an easy thing to do. How did I do it? How did I change that ingrained thinking and conditioning for more than 50 years? Really simple. 2 steps. What do you think I'm going to say? Practice daily meditation to calm the mind, slow down the thinking. And number 2, affirmations. If they are constantly repeated, they create new neural pathways into the brain and can replace old thoughts with new ones. So that really means that if you are a negative thinker, you pick out yourself some good affirmations that are relevant to you, like, I'm living my best life, or I am creating the best life for me, whatever is relevant to you. And every time these negative thoughts come up, you automatically replace them with this. I think, like all things like that, it was easy for me because I was desperate to change. I was desperate to break out of this BAM zone, and I wanted to be normal, and I would have done anything. I think I told you that when the first time I saw a therapist, I said, just tell me what to do. Just tell me what to do. Give me as much homework as you like, because whatever you want me to do, I'm going to do it. I want to be well. And I think when you're in that mindset, when you're in that frame of mind, doing something that I've just described is incredibly easy, because it isn't going to cost you any money. So I am going to have another podcast further down the line where I really want to talk about both of these things and how together that they can change you as a person. The benefits are beyond description. If you have new positive thinking, you can become a different person. So now, I'm almost at the end. I want to say my thank yous to my close-knit, small group of friends who have encouraged me from day one. Thank you. To the friends I met at the Glasgow podcast studio, to Callum, to Mark, who've also given me constant encouragement, and thanks for all the great gabs that we've had. And to the small community that grew of those who enjoyed the podcast, and to those who messaged me on Instagram, always with encouragement and positivity. And to Scott Patterson, who from day one also encouraged and helped me and still does. Thank you, Scott. So what have I learned? So much. But the first thing that comes to mind is my live videos. I managed to chase away everyone, well, almost everyone, because I didn't know the rules. I thought it was a conversation. It's not a conversation. So to those I may have frightened or offended by putting them on the spot, asking them questions, I apologise. I will regroup, stand back and step away for a while and return with a different way of doing a live. But I want to take a moment to tell you about the new podcast that's coming to you at the end of September. And it's called Unmuzzled Conversations. And I'm going to be co-hosting this with my brother. There'll be no interviews. It's just going to be me and my brother co-hosting a podcast. And what we're going to be doing is looking back in time to old Glasgow and Glaswegians. And so for people who are a lot younger than us, then maybe a glimpse into how your granny lived, or your great auntie, or maybe people in your family or people that are over 60 that may remember some of the old times. And if you're a real Glaswegian, or you've been to Glasgow and you enjoyed the Glaswegianness, then I think that this is of interest. And we've done this before in another medium, and we both learned so much ourselves, and we both really really enjoyed it. So we're going to start by talking about how Glasgow was affected by World War II. And we're going to move from that point up until today. So as we get nearer the 60s and stuff, then we can start to talk about our own personal stories. And we can also, as well, talk about the stories that our mum and dad told us, you know, their own experiences of being in the war. And some of them are, you know, if you don't know anything about it, you actually might find it quite interesting. And it will be funny. There'll be funny stories as well. So the aim of this podcast is to bring the older citizens into the podcast world by bringing content that they can relate to. The podcasting world tends to be mostly populated by young people for young people. And the older citizens are a huge part of our community. So I feel they need to be included. And who better than two older people to entice them in? So if you know anyone that they think, listen, it's about time they get involved in podcasts. It's the new thing. It's the new way to learn things and to enjoy other people's company, especially if, number one, as you get older and maybe your eyesight isn't as good. Well, eyes aren't necessary to enjoy a podcast. And maybe if you're not able to get out so much and you're missing, you know, the kind of, listening to people of your own age group talking about things that you may personally remember, then we can come into your home. I just feel, as a pensioner myself, it's very important that we try our best to include older people are always the last ones to get involved. It's the same, you know, I can remember when mobile phones first came out. Of course, I remember most of my life without a mobile phone. But and they were the ones that said, oh no, that'll never catch on. But they said that about the telly, they said that about radio, they said that about the old-fashioned landline telephones. So old people need a little bit more of convincing sometimes. But they're brilliant. You know, they've got great stories themselves to tell. And perhaps we'll do some lives and get a chance to listen to some of their stories once we get going. So we're really, really looking forward to that. I'm looking forward to introducing you to my brother and to this new type of podcast. And although it's primarily to get old people into the podcast, I've often found that young people are even interested too in finding out what went on in their granny's lifetime or even earlier than that. So if you know anybody, please tell them to get ready. We're going to get ready to join them at the end of September. Unmuzzled Conversations, end of September. As for Unmuzzled at 67, well, now we're onto a new era called the next chapter. And we are going to continue sharing my experience of how to improve your quality of life, really just based on my own experience. And starting with what else? What else would we start with but meditation, the cornerstone of my path to a better way of living, and leading for me to a different way of thinking. So the first thing we're going to do in the new chapter is bring you a meditation podcast episode where I'm going to explain meditation, explain the benefits, talk about that, and actually do a 10-minute meditation practice with you. Because quite often people have said to me, but how do you do it? What do you do? And my mind's always got thoughts coming in and out my mind and I can't do it. So I thought maybe if we had the opportunity to do it together, that might be helpful. I'm very excited to be able to start another new project at my age. It's just brilliant. But I do feel the need to slow down a little. So I think these two podcasts will more than keep me busy. But again, I want to thank you for your constant support. And for your constant encouragement, and to the people on Instagram who have messaged me and just really helped me to really feel a part of this community. It's been overwhelming and just wonderful. And it has really meant a lot to me. So I look forward to meeting up with you again with a brand new Unmuzzled Conversations at the end of September. And the next chapter, which is going to be our meditation video, and that is going to be next week. So look forward to seeing you then. Thanks for everything. Please join me in the new chapter.